So AWE is is an organization about augmented virtual reality with amazing events worldwide, with some main ones in the United States, in Europe, and in China, and some community-driven AWE night events like this one, AWE Nite Florence. It is an organization that you can join these events on AWE Live. That is a platform to which you can meet people, you can attend interesting events. And you can join the most important events of AWE in June in the US, in August in Asia, in Shanghai, and October in Europe, this time in Lisbon. These are the upcoming events on AWE.live. This one AWE Nite Florence, and others from Charlie Fink and other important creators in our ecosystem. And then there is AWE Academy with important workshops and courses about AR and VR that you can attend on AWE Academy and keep updated on social media on this important academy.
Welcome everybody from AWE Nite Florence, coming to you live from Laval, France. We are honored to be guests of the Laval Virtual Europe 2022 and to be joining you on AWE Live, the app that allows the whole world of XR to stay in touch throughout the year, in addition to meeting in person at the annual AWE USA, AWE Europe, and AWE Asia events. My name is CECILIA LASCIALFARI, co-founder of area6doc.com, creative technologist, aspiring journalist, and organizer of AWE Nite Florence event. Laurent Chrétien, general manager of Laval Virtual, will join us shortly and will give a welcome and presentation of Laval Virtual Europe 2022, which this year will be held from 12 to 14 April, and which with great news. I'm very excited to be here in Laval and to have this live connection with Charlie Fink and SUZANNE Borders in America and Lorenzo Cappannari in Italy, who will analyze the theme of the metaverse evolution and use cases. There are many questions that we all ask ourselves about the metaverse, such as what is the metaverse? How real is metaverse and what does it mean for us? How can I benefit from it? How can I best use it? Are there immersive data analytics platforms? When can we talk about virtual transformation? How much has the media industry grown in recent years? Are we facing a virtual transformation like we have never seen before? Einstein said, everything is relative. For Einstein, it was necessary to abandon the common concept of space and time in favor of a new structure, the space-time described by the theory of relativity. Matter tells space-time how to bend, and space-time tells matter how to move. Was Einstein a predictor of the current metaverse? The word metaverse is a term coined by Neil Stephenson in the cyberpunk novel Snow Crash in 1992 and was used to indicate a three-dimensional space in which individuals can move, share, and interact through personalized avatars. And are there any rules in the metaverse? The metaverse is the next significant development in global communications, writes Tony Parisi, one of the early pioneers in VR, in his article on Medium of 22 October 2021. Tony Parisi also lists 7 interesting rules of metaverse. Rule 1. There is only one metaverse. Rule 2. The metaverse is for everyone. Rule 3. Nobody controls the metaverse. Rule 4. The metaverse is open. Rule 5. The metaverse is hardware independent. Rule 6. The metaverse is a network. Rule 7. The metaverse is the internet. Today, we talk about all this together. Charlie Fink, Suzanne Borders, Lorenzo Cappannari, Laurent Chrétien, who will help us answer some of these questions. Here with me is also my co-organizer of Nite Florence, Anthony Vitillo. Hi, Anthony.
Hey.
It's great to have you here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anthony Vitillo, the scout goes for someone, and for the first time, I'm here together with Cecilia for Nite Florence after more than 1.5 years to do events together. I'm also a bit, everything has been crazy today. We've been at Laval doing lots of activities. This event inside event is pretty cool. So I don't want to waste too much time saying who I am. I work in XR since 8 years, being a blogger, developer, and entrepreneur. And I can't wait to speak with you in the chat and have a panel in the end together. So Cecilia, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. And now we welcome Charlie Fink, a Metaverse consultant, a Forbes tech columnist, and the author of the critically acclaimed AR-enabled books Metaverse 2017 and Convergence 2019. It teaches XR as an adjunct professor at Chapman University in Orange, California. The title of his speech is Dissecting the Metaverse, the who, what, and why of an emerging platform. Hi, Charlie. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hey, greetings from Los Angeles, where it's 9 in the morning and a crisp 60 degrees. Since I taught 2 years online, I'm rather good at speaking to an empty room and a little green light. Let me get started with my presentation. I should say, well, let's see how this works out. Share. Are you guys seeing that? I assume someone will say something if you're not. So I'm writing a new book. It's called The New Metaverse Book. Why should I be the only one left out when 50 other people are writing books about the metaverse? Of course, you guys know me. I've been writing about XR for 6 years, I guess. And as Tony and Cecilia mentioned, I've written several books on XR. They were AR enabled. They were books that talked the talk and walked the walk, if you will. So you read the book with a smartphone in your hand. You're going to have a smartphone right next to you if you're reading a book anyway. And you hold it over the pages, and using computer vision and plane detection, out pops a virtual Charlie greeting you on the book of the cover of the book and so forth. My other book, Convergence, works the same way. It was the work of 20 people in the industry, including Tony, working together to discuss how technologies were converging that would make an augmented world possible. And in fact, all of that is coming to pass right now. So I've been in media and technology since 1983. So I am, like Tony Parisi, a genuine old guy. And I have 3 closely held beliefs, and I use it as a filter through which all of my analysis and thinking about spatial computing passes through. So first of all, as we all know, technology succeeds when it makes what we're already doing better, faster, and cheaper. And of course, there's no better example than Amazon. We check our phones 400 times a day. Why do I do that? Well, yes, I am a news junkie, but what I'm really looking for is email, messages, tweets that mention me, because people are the killer app, and we are isolated today. We are alone. So we need that dopamine fix of human contact even more desperately than we traditionally have, because of course being social is imprinted in our DNA. And finally, one thing that certainly is mentioned over and over again in many talks and by many thought leaders is that we really overestimate the short term. and we underestimate the long term. And of course, we're the metaverse or metaverses are a great example than that. Snow Crash, of course, was the first public novel to talk about the metaverse, and it's I love that it's a portmanteau of meta, meaning above everything, and then universe. Ready Player One, of course, extended this idea. It had two main differences with Snow Crash. One is that it did not anticipate the inclusion of the digital twin of the physical world in the metaverse. So it doesn't really have any AR to speak of, whereas in the Neil Stephenson book, people passed back and forth between simulations of the physical world and actual virtual, fully occluded virtual reality. So Ready Player One posits that in 2012, a video game company called Gregarious Games introduced something called the Oasis. And they provided a head-mounted display, and it was so great and so powerful that the whole world piled in there, sort of like the internet in 1995, with a huge surge of FOMO. We've been talking about the metaverse even before the rebrand of Facebook as Meta. We've been talking about the metaverse for quite a while, at least those of us on the inside. And then in January 2020, Matthew Ball, who is a venture capitalist, former Amazon Studios strategy executive, published on his very influential blog an essay about the metaverse. And he put out some concepts that I think, about which I think there's general agreement. That inside of the metaverse, you would have presence. The presence would be persistent, so that if you were in a room and broke a glass and you came back tomorrow, the glass would be there broken. And also with regarding to time. So, and at the same time, you would be in an environment that had unlimited simultaneous users, so that you could have a simulation or a simulation space with, you know, millions of people simultaneously present. For example, when we looked at the Travis Scott concert on Fortnite, you know, we were in 470,000 rooms of only 100 people. It's very hard by chance to run into friends there unless you coordinate and enter the game as a team. Ball talks about unprecedented interoperability. So by this, he means the ability of somebody on an iPhone to play in a game with somebody in VR or somebody on a game console, so that, you know, it doesn't matter what device you're doing. The metaverse is device agnostic, and you can move between games and between social spaces at will, bringing with you your backpack, if you will, that has within it, you know, currency that enables e-commerce. It can do microtransactions. So if 40 million people went to see Travis Scott and they all paid 10 cents, they would have made $4.7 million in 12 minutes. The way people throw around money and numbers today, $12 million, $4.7 million doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're Travis Scott or any individual, it does, of course. Everything counts in large amounts. Ball also talked about the ownership of digital land, as well as digital objects, again, that we purchase, that would be ours, that would be persistent, that would travel with us from place to place. Whether or not you'll be able to use the magic sword from World of Warcraft inside of Call of Duty remains to be seen. But of course, the whole, you know, climax of all this metaverse talk was one of the largest companies in the world changing its name to Meta and committing $10 billion a year to develop it. I mean, $10 billion a year is an incredible amount of money. And Zuckerberg has a very specific view of the metaverse, which, by the way, is not the same view that Ball has. You see here from his earliest definition of the metaverse, he sees it as fully embodied, right? That you have a body and you are viewing the metaverse from the inside, right? You have physical presence there and connections to other people with whom you can have shared experiences, conversation, build things together. You know, it's very open-ended, right? Visualizing the metaverse as similar to the physical world. And of course, Zuckerberg's avatar is similar in his appearance. Any of you who have interacted with me in XR see that my appearance is generally the same, because what people tend to do with avatars, or at least the first thing they do, is they want an idealized version of themselves. That's why Ready Player Me is, which you can use, an avatar system you can use across, I think, almost 2,000 games, enables you to create a kind of idealized version of yourself. So again, interoperability. Now, Zuckerberg has a very different view of interoperability. What he means is the ability of people outside of a simulation to participate in it. For example, in Horizon Workrooms, which is a VR space for collaboration and meetings, which is free. It's actually quite nice. And you can bring video participants into that simulation. So somebody is mobile, they're on their smartphone, they can participate, but they're participating in a diminished way, right? Presence is not always the same. I have presence now with you because I've suspended my disbelief and I've chunked out my room, and all I'm doing is looking at the green light and telling you a story that I have told many times. And actually, it's helpful for me to tell this. It's always slightly different, and it always helps me think about the book. So two big differences between Zuckerberg and Ball. One of them has to do with a fully embodied avatar. The other has to do with the idea of interoperability. A bit more about what Metaverse, what Meta has is committing to spend on the Metaverse. You know, they see it as social first. They're dumping tons of money into Horizon. There are announcements from Horizon every week. You know, they are trying to catch up to Rec Room and VR Chat and to offer a very complete metaverse, small m metaverse. I would say the chances that they will create the Oasis is very high. You know, they're also working on the meta layer. I should mention both Ball and Zuckerberg acknowledge, let me see, is this on the next slide? Yeah. Ball and Zuckerberg acknowledge that the technology for us to have unlimited simultaneous users in the same simulation, like a concert in Fortnite, is a technological impossibility. Right? 5G isn't enough. There's not the cloud computing infrastructure and the wireless infrastructure or wired infrastructure that would allow us to have that amount of cloud streaming, realistic avatars in an unlimited environment. I mean, that's, you know, that's why Zuckerberg was at Mobile World Congress talking to international telcos, Verizon, Vodafone, NTT. All these companies are going to have a role in building the infrastructure to enable the metaverse. But until that happens, what we've got is a theoretical construct, an ideal, if you will, that indeed has transformative potential. But in my opinion, and this is where we have a big divergence, in my opinion, VR is central. Without VR, we would not be talking about this. Without the acquisition of Oculus, Facebook, or Meta, it would not be committing $10 billion. So I actually think that the metaverse is a VR first experience. You have no presence in Sandbox. Sandbox is the internet. And frankly, the metaverse, or the many metaverses, small m, plural, can be a version of them can be had in small m metaverses like Horizon and VR Chat. And if you will, you know, Fortnite and Sandbox. Why not? Because everybody can have their own definition of the metaverse. Very convenient. It doesn't exist and probably will take 10 years or more. Also, because we all can have our own definition, hey, the metaverse is for everyone, right? So we can have our own definition, but the term is being genericized down to nothing. When people realize that the metaverse is VR first, when people realize that it doesn't really exist yet, and it's a term that is being used self-servingly by everybody on the face of the earth right now. And that means, of course, it's inevitably headed for the trough of disillusion. Here we have it. VR went through a trial of disillusion before the Quest was released. That was because PC VR had too much friction for normal people. It was just for prosumers who could work their way through a gaming computer, which, by the way, is really expensive and hard to get a good one. But I think this is where the metaverse is going to be next year. Because you know what we do in the tech press, right? We find a new technology and we can't stop talking about it, right? It's just too exciting. The possibilities are just too huge, right? But then about a week later, and sometimes a week later, but about a year later, someone says, hey, wait a minute, right? Hey, wait a minute. Oculus isn't even a product yet. Oh my God, the Oculus product sucks. And PC Oculus sucks. I'm here to say it. So does HTC Vive. There was never a chance those would be commercialized, and that's why they were in a trial of disillusion. And by the way, I separate enterprise and consumer in that, because clearly simulated training is the way to go. It's much more effective. So enterprise, I think, is starting to rapidly gravitate toward XR training. So it's not the same. But everything in tech is timing, right? I love the story. I love business stories in general. That's why I like writing about this, and I call it the greatest business story of our time. And within it are all these other stories, these case studies. And in fact, one is called General Magic. It was spun out of Apple in the late 80s with a vision to create a communication device that would allow you to make phone calls, send messages, send email. It was, in short, the smartphone. But it was the smartphone before anybody had a cell phone. It was email and messages before anybody had email at home or generally at work. So it was a widely misunderstood product. And as a result, they sold 2,000 of them, and like Magic Leap ended up destroying the rest. I think they're expensive on eBay too. So let's talk just a little more about this. These ideas of presence and cross-platform. Augmented reality has a role to play in the metaverse. There is a digital twin of the physical world. Google Maps has it. Other companies like Niantic, the company behind Pokemon Go, they are like Snapchat, a camera-first, mobile AR-first company. Mixed reality will play a role, right? The physical and the digital are going to mingle together in the metaverse and in many small m metaverses. Great example, of course, is you can bring your PC with you into Horizon Rooms, which is your magic. I mean, I show that to my class and there's an audible gasp as people grasp what this is and how potentially important it can be. So finally, let's talk about the metaverse that is in development, right? Not the metaverses that exist today, although, again, aspects of them are being established, explored in the small metaverses today. So the most important thing is this giant metaverse, meta layer that would connect everything together. Meta, the company, says that they're working on it. So this is a very big part that doesn't exist. It is the part that is pure fiction. Now, the avatar, which we take with us everywhere, is very important, particularly if the avatar includes things like different wardrobes. You're not going to, wardrobe is becoming a very big deal. It is a big deal in Fortnite. People will pay to decorate their avatar, and you would want that wardrobe to be accessible to you no matter where you are. And you would want to have your smartphone with you wherever you are, right? Because you're going to want to contact people in the physical world. You need to know what time it is. You want to show somebody an app. You have to have access to the internet in a mobile way, just like in the physical world. And then finally, the spawn point. right? Where you materialize is the new desktop. Meta really gets this. I have to give them credit for this. They, you know, what you see when you log in right now is very conventional, and it's what you would expect, right? The experiences that you've downloaded that are ready to go, and then a store that gives you an opportunity to preview apps before you buy them. And it also, so this screen is going to remain part of it, but it's going to be diminished as you can move around that space, decorate that space. So there actually is a use for NFTs. You can decorate that space. You can bring in 3D objects from a platform like Sketchfab, or I probably not. It's because of the way they're doing Horizon from some kind of a Horizon asset store. So who else is working on the metaverse? Well, guess what? Everybody is, because we're not just talking about technology here. We're talking about the future of mankind. You know, we talk about Horizon and VR chat, and these are virtual worlds that have within them many other virtual worlds. Now, is that the metaverse? Well, as I said, sure, why not? I mean, I'm not here to debunk anybody else's metaverse, but I don't think any of these really are VR first. So I don't think, you know, any of these qualifies as the metaverse. That said, of course, Grand Theft Auto is coming to the Meta Quest, and there is Call of Duty, although it's not accessible to everybody because it's, you know, the game is bigger than the 64 gig entry level $300 Quest 2. But, you know, the reason that people like Matthew Ball see in Fortnite and Roblox, see the putative metaverse in these games, is because there is a burgeoning e-commerce. People are, you know, the biggest brands and entertainment brands in the world are in there with Epic selling costumes that players own, just to use one example. So big M or little m metaverses, well, there's really no way a big M metaverse could exist. As I said, the infrastructure is not there yet. There are international borders, right? 3/4 of the world is looking at an internet very different than the one you and I are looking at here in the West. And the other thing is the unbelievable unintended consequences that the metaverse or a fully embodied internet could create. Unlimited brainwashing, right? You won't be, what happens when we can't tell what's real and what's not real? You know, what happens in Grand Theft Auto when, you know, you can kidnap the non-player characters and do whatever you wanted with them, right? To use one example, and we know psychologists have established that this behavior will be emulated in the real world, and everybody remembers the Newton killer. He was obsessed with Call of Duty, played Call of Duty 20 hours before he went and, you know, carried out the terrible mass killing. That is also true of the Swedish guy who attacked all those teenagers on an island retreat. So the unintended consequences, and you know what's scary is that Meta is leading our charge into these kinds of simulations, and it is the least trusted company in the world and the least minded of unintended consequences, which, you know, arguably, I don't know, are destroying democracy, but, you know, nothing is too sacred in the name of profits, you know, with the diminishment of international borders, or I should say with the development of international corporations. You know, you have to wonder whether they are America first or whether they are profit first, and whether or not having profit first companies is even good for society. All right, let's talk about a few things that aren't the metaverse. Web3 is not the metaverse. Web3 means a lot of different things. People are using it to promote different technologies like blockchain. Originally, it seemed to be some kind of an infrastructure for crypto transactions, people who want to decentralize the internet. I mean, whatever, it's the metaverse if you want, but again, I can't see how a 2D game like Sandbox is the metaverse in any way. But okay, they're calling it the metaverse. Crypto, not the metaverse. NFTs, possibly useful in spatial computing, but again, by themselves, not the metaverse. The virtual land thing, I mean, is the metaverse, but it's stupid. because proximity is not going to matter, right? It's not going to matter if you're next door to Snoop Dogg's house, because we're not getting rid of hyperlinks anytime soon. In VR, we call them teleportation, but we do not get around in VR based on proximity. And if there was a virtual world in VR that forced me to walk everywhere, it is probably not the small M metaverse where I would spend the most time. So we're hurtling our way toward 2030, when everything will be connected. And I do believe there will be...
Charlie, sorry to interrupt you, but you have just 2 minutes more to finish everything.
Okay, that's good, because I'm on my second to last
Be
slide.
the bad guy. I love your presentation, but
Okay, all right, fine. Here are the last 2 slides. We're done.
Hi, 2 minutes.
No, let's go. Questions, or we can talk about the rest of it when we have our panel.
I introduce Suzanne. I introduce Suzanne. Sorry, we are just evaluating one thing. You chose to be too
Well, you
fast.
ended the presentation, so let's go. On with the show.
Introduce Laurent.
Yes.
Please.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. And now I'm very excited to welcome Laurent Chrétien, General Manager at Laval Virtual, with a demonstrated history of working in virtual reality and augmented reality events for services and industries. Skilled in entrepreneurship, business development, marketing strategy, and management. Hi, Laurent. Thank you for welcome to Laval. We are so excited to be here at Laval Virtual and to have you with us this evening. Laurent, is he there?
Yeah, everything is live here. So Laurent is arriving in the building, but it's just to find things. Yeah, I was just looking in the chat, an interesting comment about we were all loving the overview that Charlie was having, especially I appreciated as well the comment about the internet. For 3/4 of the world, there's different internet from the West. So we used to have some consideration about the internet, and so we can imagine as the metaverse can become something, you know, evolving that. But as he said correctly, it's like it's like that also for the metaverse, you have to consider that a great part of the world that is completely ecosystem different from us, both from cultural and also from technological standpoint. So it's an amazing point of view that I wanted to highlight because it's incredible. So it seems that
is around.
Yeah, Laurent has got lost, but we will find him after the amazing speech by Suzanne Borders, that is the CEO and founder of BadVR, one of the world's most important immersive data analytics platform. She's amazing. She's also a friend of mine. I love how she's able always to mix technology with creativity. So her speech is entitled Revolutionizing Data with XR, and we invite on the stage Suzanne Borders. Hey, Suzanne.
Hello. Hi, how are you doing? Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's
awesome. Yeah, great. Amazing. Well, thank you all for joining me. Are you going to be able to bring up the presentation? There we go. Perfect. Thank you so much. You might want to go and do the presentation mode. I can't see that. There we go. Okay, perfect. So as Tony mentioned, today I'll be talking about using XR technology to revolutionize the way we look at data, the way we interact with data, and the way we understand data. You can also think about it as, you know, data in the metaverse as well. You can go on to the next slide. So a little bit about me. Thank you so much for the intro, Tony. But a little bit about my background. I'm the CEO and founder of BadVR. I spent, before I founded BadVR, I spent about 9 years of my life designing 2D data visualization and analytics platforms. But the unique background that I have is that all of the products that I designed prior to founding BadVR had non-technical end users. So when you think about, being a product designer or a UX designer for a data analytics platform, you make the automatic assumption that the people that you're designing that platform for are data analysts and data scientists. But for me, that was never the case. I was always designing for people like real estate agents who tended to be, or to fit the profile of my mom. So they were really non-technical people. And it was such an interesting challenge to take really complex data and data analytics and really simplify that down to a product that would be able or enable non-technical end users to get the same sort of value and meaning out of that data that, say, a traditional analyst would have gotten. So during that process of, building these products, designing these products, I came up with the idea of adding in immersive technology and using immersive technology to really unlock the potential of these data sets and to make it, more accessible for everyone. Anyways, during that whole process, founded BadVR late 2017. We've been operational since the beginning of 2018. During that whole process as well, we've gone through and funded ourselves primarily through grants and contracts with the National Science Foundation, NOAA, NIST, a bunch of sort of data sets that are brought into our platform that enable us to really interact with data in this new way. I also, as Tony mentioned, I'm a big proponent of bringing together technology and creativity. So I myself have a very unique background as well in terms of, I'm a poet and an author, and I've also visited a bunch of different countries. So, I like to bring that unique creative mindset to the process of building and designing my technology. So you can find me on Twitter at Suzanne Borders. But yeah, so that's a little bit about my background. Go ahead to the next slide. So the way that we think of data today is completely, or what the data sets today are completely different than the data sets from even 5 years ago or 10 years ago, right? It's changed, data itself has changed enormously, especially in the scale and complexity of the data sets that we currently have and that we're currently working with. And this is only expected to astronomically continue to grow. If you think back about, what data was in, the 1980s, the 1990s, even in the beginning of 2000s, even 2 years ago, the nature of these data sets is completely different. So, when it's just one of those things where what was working in the past to work with those data sets, to look at those data sets, it's not really necessarily working today. So go ahead to the next slide. So the problem here, however, is that the way that we're choosing to work with and view these data sets has not changed in over 200 years. And that seems like something crazy to say. Well, we have changed in terms of the way that we access this, but the way that we visualize it and the way that we communicate data sets has not really changed. And I'll show you what I mean by that. You can go on to the next slide. So this is from the 1800s. This is a visualization that doesn't necessarily look that much different from the 2D dashboards that we have today in the way that it's displayed in a two-dimensional chart. Go on to the next one. And this is from the 1940s. Again, the delivery method in terms of whether it's handwritten on a piece of paper or whether it's printed on a piece of paper, it's still the same 2D chart and graph. You can go on to the next one. And again, as I mentioned, here we have a dashboard, which is something that you would be able to access from a computer today, like a laptop, a cell phone, a smartphone, a desktop computer. But the fundamental way that we're visualizing this is not changing, right? It's still a 2D chart and graph. Maybe you have more charts and graphs. Maybe you're combining them together into a more robust dashboard, but you're not fundamentally reimagining or changing the way that this data is displayed. You can go on to the next slide. So the problem with this 2D analysis, and this is a problem that, not only that we're experiencing today, but that's going to become more and more difficult as time goes by in the near future, is that it's just really siloed. So it worked, 2D data visualization worked when the data that it was visualizing was small enough and simple enough that those 2D charts and graphs were accurate and effective in communicating the insights. But the problem now is that they're just not. So you end up having these data sets that are large and complex enough that you need multiple charts and graphs to really communicate and discover insights within them. But the problem is that then you're looking at multiple different charts and graphs, and it becomes really siloed. You can look at this one, you can look at that one, or you can look at them all together or all individually. But the net result is that you have to sort of stitch them all together into a multidimensional understanding, because the data itself is multidimensional, right? So the way that you're visualizing it ultimately is multidimensional, but you're sort of having to compromise and get there by siloing it through these 2D charts. You know, this visualization is perfect when you're trying to communicate this concept. You have individual people, you know, all sort of having this one straight viewpoint into a multidimensional object, right? So they're all sort of seeing something different because they're all looking at a multidimensional object from a different point of view. With obviously that's not ideal, especially when you're trying to communicate with other people. So they are seeing something, you're seeing something, and you're not really sure what is accurate or what is real. And then you're also losing the context, right? So if you're only looking at one piece of this multidimensional data set, you're not really able to understand how that piece fits in with the larger good, right? And everybody's obviously, you know, trying to communicate something, but they can't fully see it. And that's incredibly difficult. It's also incredibly difficult to find accurate insights when you can't really see the whole thing. And when you have data sets that are as complex and as large as they are, once you start talking about this like global metaverse, this is only going to become more and more of an issue. You can move on to the next slide. So I, like Edward Tufte, believe that we shouldn't have to abbreviate this fundamental truth. We need to find a better way to present it, right? So the problem with, you know, the way that we're working with it now is that we're all sort of having to make these compromises. We're all just saying, oh, well, you know, there's no better way to do this. So we're just going to have a 42 slide PowerPoint presentation, right? Which is not ideal. And I just am not happy to compromise like that. I do believe there's a better way. So let's go ahead and use this technology and use this opportunity to find a better method of presenting these data sets. So you can move on to the next slide. The solution, as you may well have inferred by the title of my presentation, so I believe adding an immersion will really help solve this problem. And when I say immersion, I'm not necessarily saying, you know, it has to be VR, it has to be AR, it has to be any sort of specific type of immersive technology. It really is just adding in that factor of dimensionality to the presentation and to the experience of working with data sets. So a great example of what, you know, the problem is with 2D and how 3D adds value to it is communicated by this visualization. So this is a sculpture by the artist called Bernard Praz. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. If I'm not, I apologize. But basically the concept is it's a piece of art with items placed in a room, right? And you walk into it and those items just look like a total mess from several different viewpoints. But if you stand in one specific area and you look at those items, it creates this picture. So the concept here being that if there is something that is multidimensional, you really truly only understand it by experiencing it multidimensionally. And that's especially true of anything within the metaverse. If you're only getting, for instance, a flat screenshot of something that is a multidimensional object, you're not really ever going to fully understand it, just like you would never really understand this sort of art if you're looking at it from only one point of view, because one person is seeing a total mess, the other person is looking at this and seeing, you know, a masterpiece, or seeing Salvador Dali's head in this instance. So then it becomes an argument between those two people, which one of those viewpoints is the truth, when in actuality it's option C. Both of those viewpoints are true, experienced from multidimensional angles, but it's very, very hard to communicate that if you're only ever looking at these 2D presentations of it. Go to the next slide. So the value out of immersive technology is really just breaking down, or sorry, the value out of immersive technology to looking at and working with data is just breaking down those walls, right? Taking away that sort of siloed viewpoint, and having everybody collaborate together in an immersive space with the entire data set presented multidimensionally. This allows this sort of holistic collaborative understanding where everybody's instantaneously grasping the concept of the scale and the complexity of the data and enabling them to work with that data in a sort of a natural environment. So if something is, for instance, you have like a geospatial data set, right, that has a multidimensional real world tie-in, it only makes sense to look at that data in that capacity. Any other presentation of it, you're losing context, you're having to compromise. And since we now have the opportunity to utilize, you know, AR, VR, XR, all these different types of, you know, technology that it has a spatial component to it, why would we not do that, right? It gives everyone the same context. So you're all sort of starting from the same base level of understanding, which is incredibly valuable. I'm not sure if anyone has ever really gone through this experience. I'm pretty sure you have, where you're taking a concept. It's sort of like playing telephone, where you have a data scientist, he goes through a data set, he finds these insights, he presents them in a long PowerPoint presentation and trying to communicate, sort of stitch together this concept. But it's every single person is getting lost in each one of these items, and you know, everybody's receiving the same information, but you're not really coming to the same conclusion, just because you're not seeing the same thing. But with XR technology, everybody sees everything, and therefore everyone has equal opportunity to understand it, and it aids in that sort of communication process. So you can move to the next slide. So my belief is that computing is undergoing this fourth revolution, right? We started with the mainframe, we moved to the PC, then there was this whole mobile thing, and now we're moving to this sort of immersive vision and world where data has a spatialized component to it, whether that be a spatial, you know, component that ties into the real world, or whether that be a spatial component that ties into a digital world. The data itself has some element of that spatialness to it. So if you're looking at data, condensing that data down into a 2D screen, it's just incredibly complicated. And like I said, you know, with this revolution, we're moving in this direction. It's very highly unlikely in any way that we're ever going to move back. So it just is becoming this sticking point, this bottleneck that really is difficult for people. And the only way to really overcome that is to allow the data to be viewed and interacted with in this immersive sense. So you can move on to the next slide. So, you know, when we're talking about immersive data, a lot of people think, you know, 3D charts and graphs, and that would be a natural way to think about things, right? Because that's the way that we did it on 2D screens. It was presented in that manner. So adding in another dimension to those visualizations is the automatic conclusion of, you know, what people think of when they conceptualize three-dimensional data. But the problem is that, you know, is that really compelling enough and really, you know, effective enough to utilize immersive technology to visualize data? So are you really getting the full value of that additional technology? And are people really compelled by this concept of three-dimensional charts and graphs? And it actually is my belief that that is not true. So you can move on to the next slide. I do not believe that 3D charts and graphs are really offering enough additional value. So when I'm talking about looking at and utilizing immersive hardware and technology to view data, I'm talking about something completely different than that. I'm saying throw away all of these preconceived notions of how we display data in 2D, because they worked great for 2D, right? That's fantastic. However, 3D and immersive technology, a brand new type of technology, and they demand a new way of really looking at things, and specifically data. So when I'm talking about designing a product for that, or when I'm talking about how that data would be presented, I'm not talking about 3D charts and graphs, just to put that out there. So, but that of course begs the question, well, if it's not 3D charts and graphs, what could data possibly look like? How would you display data in the metaverse? Or how would you display the data of the metaverse, the interaction data, the data from users that are in this immersive space? How would you possibly present that if not in these sort of standard ways that we use now to present data? We can move on to the next slide. So my concept and what we do at BadVR is we use what we call data environments. So these are sort of standardized ways, in the same way that charts and graphs are these sort of standard visualizations of viewing immersive data. And they, you know, for each particular type of data set, there's a best way to present it using either AR technology, VR technology, using this environment or that environment. The data that is available has a best way of being presented, but all of these things are done through these data environments. So you're totally surrounded by the data. You're able to interact with this data. You're able to, you know, do filtering in real time. You're able to, you know, visualize data coming in, data feeds in real time. So it's not this sort of static, you know, sort of dashboard. You're not entering into a multidimensional world just to, you know, sort of observe it. You're an active participant in interacting with the data around you, and you're an active participant in setting up that data. And of course, all of these environments, you know, with the very nature of immersive technology, bringing people in, everybody's, you know, collaborating in this immersive space. So it's not just you looking at the data, it's also, you know, the people around you that are looking at it, interacting with it, notating it, coming to conclusions from it. So that's the important part of this as well. And, you know, when we're looking at this picture here, this is actually an image from one of my products called C-Signal, which I think communicates the concept of immersive data very well. You're basically putting on a headset or, you know, using an AR-enabled mobile phone to get a glimpse into the whole world of RF signal data that you personally now cannot see. So it's sort of like adding a superpower to your own senses. So you're able to see Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and cellular networks all around you, because really the data is all around you. It's there. You just can't currently see it. But with immersive technology, using AR, in this case, you can also use VR to look at this data. It makes it so much easier to really understand in a holistic sense what your networks look like, where they're strong, where they're weak, and more importantly, how do they interact with each other? And also, who's accessing this network? What does that history look like? Is there something in the room that's transmitting signals and you're not aware of it? All of these things, you know, are possible with the C-Signal technology and allow you to really have this like understanding of your world in a multidimensional sense and the data around you in a way that just is not possible without, you know, this product. And it's really exciting, you know, conceptually, because this is a way to look at data that is not a chart or graph, but really does make sense and showcases this concept of multidimensional data. So you could move to the next slide. So I think, you know, going to like the core pillars of what's important when you're talking about an immersive data display, moving back and forth between slides, is that all of it has to be interactive, right? Because if you're bringing, either looking at data from something like a metaverse experience, you're looking at data that's created by a multidimensional experience, or you're looking at data that's coming from some other place, like either the real world or, you know, a not like dashboard that you had previously. All of it, you have to be able to interact with it. Using immersive technology to just put data out there in a static way doesn't really make sense. And at least in my experience, it's really great to be able to use sort of natural gestures for that as well. So just being able to have really simple interfaces, really simple ways to communicate that data and interact with that data, like reaching out and grabbing a stick, being able to get a signal reading, stuff like that is really important. And it's also really important to be able to bring in multiple different types of data sets, because the whole value add of using immersive technology is that you can have a much larger scale of information, and that you're able to interact and drill down into specific points in that information without losing that broader context. So you're looking at, you know, large scale patterns, while also simultaneously being able to drill down and see that specific individual data point. It's also important to be device agnostic, and I think that that's something that in the future really won't necessarily be as important as it is right now, because I think all of it is sort of converging into one device, which, whether that be a headset or whether that be a contact lens, you know, the differences between AR, VR, and XR, mixed reality, I think all of that will just sort of converge into one, you know, thing in the future. But for right now, you know, I think it's important that we focus on this accessibility. So whether people have headsets or whether they have phones or whether they have some other device that allows them to sort of get a view into that world, I think it's really important to support all of these things, especially because a lot of the devices are either not available in all parts of the world, they're really price prohibitive, or people, you know, just aren't willing to sort of go all in on that. But if you give them a window into it from like mobile phone, it really sort of draws their interest and maybe gets them a little bit more engaged. And then I think the last part of it is this utility first approach. And I think this is really important, not just for data in the metaverse or, you know, visualizing data. I think it's important across the whole sort of immersive spectrum of really focusing on solving real problems, and then focusing on products that have a, you know, usability front of mind. A lot of issues, at least that I've experienced with people in immersive technologies, they put on a headset and an app that they're experiencing just really is hard to use. There's not a lot of like best practices for UX design or for product design in the AR and VR sort of industry right now. So what ends up happening is a lot of these apps are just really difficult to use. People aren't really familiar with it. There's no sort of like established baseline for their expectations on things of how they work. So I think it's really important to like focus on that, making it a utility first approach. Anyways,
So,
I think I'm
sorry
probably
for
running out of time. Yeah.
up again, but you have 2 minutes to finish. You too.
Great. Thank
Sorry.
you. Yeah, no worries, no worries. And I do really think that when you're talking about, you know, adoption of immersive technology, making sure that everyone is able to access it, whether that be from, you know, being device agnostic with applications and experiences, or whether that be, you know, making sure that the interfaces that you design are easy and simple to use. I think that that's really a barrier that at least I've seen towards adoption, is that, you know, the more difficult it is for people to either access the, you know, immersive experience or to interact with or use the immersive experience, the less likely they are to adopt the technology as a broader whole. So I think, you know, not only is it important for, you know, specifically data, but also all sort of immersive experiences, I think, need to focus on these things. So we can, as an industry, sort of focus on upping the adoption level. So you can actually go to the next slide, which I think is the last slide. I go one more. I do have a video if we wanted to play this. I don't know, we're sort of having issues with sound before, but this sort of displays this concept of what data looks like when it is immersive. And this is obviously using AR technology. So you're still seeing the real world, you're seeing data overlaid on the real world. But, you know, obviously there are use cases as well where it's, you're looking at it in a completely separate virtual world. But did we want to go ahead and try to play this video? Hello?
So I'll post the video in the chat.
Okay, sounds great. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, just conceptually, it's just one of those things where a lot of the times people just don't, they have a hard time understanding, you know, data. What does it look like if it isn't these like 3D charts or graphs or a 3D dashboard, or even, you know, people have concepts of it being a bunch of, you know, like instead of having 5 flat dashboard screens, we have like 1,000. And to me, that's just really not, and from our research, it just doesn't, that doesn't really work. But this concept of having data be this multidimensional, you know, environment or experience is really the best way to utilize the space offered by immersive technology. And I think as we go more and more towards having a world in which we have, you know, this metaverse, and we have more immersive apps and tech, you know, use cases, there's going to be data that's generated from that we are going to have to also find a way to visualize and use. So I think that not only, you know, working with real world data, working with, you know, abstract data sets that don't have this real world tie-in, and then also working with spatial data that comes from virtual experiences, all of these things are sort of going to come together, and there's really going to need to be a new way to work with them. So anyways, thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Suzanne. And now I'm very excited to welcome again Laurent Chrétien, General Manager at Laval Virtual. Hi, Laurent. Thank you for welcome to Laval.
Thank you for the invitation.
Please.
Okay, so first, sorry for the delay because there is a lot of side events to Laval Virtual, and I have to go from event to event. maybe as we are speaking about the use cases of metaverse, maybe I should first give my definition of what is or what will be the metaverse, because according to me, there is no metaverse at all today. Metaverse is the convergence of several technologies, convergence, of course, of what is visible. It means the virtual worlds, and the convergence of other technologies such as blockchain, such as AI, such as cloud computing. And if you go on the hardware side, all the devices who will permit to feel, to see, of course, but to hear, to feel, and to the haptic devices and so on, will permit to make much more things inside of the virtual world. And something which is really important to understand is that as far as we don't have interoperability between all these virtual worlds, or the galaxy of virtual worlds, if we say that one galaxy is defined by a publisher, such as Sandbox or Decentraland or Virbela or whatever, we need to be able to move from planet to planet, from galaxy to galaxy, and our future avatars or our actual avatars has to move freely. So the interoperability is very important, so that the metaverse can really be, in fact. In terms of use cases, we had the chance, if we can say it is a chance, in 2020 to cancel our physical event and to transform it completely in a virtual world. And it has been a great success. And from this date, we have already operated 250 types of events in virtual worlds on several platforms. And when I say events, in fact, it's of course seminar, symposium, exhibition, and so on, simple meetings, but also training. A lot of training are done in the virtual worlds, and it's already here. It means that we can already experience how the immersion in a 3D virtual world, the interaction between the avatars, how they interact with their environments, and this can be done whether on a screen or inside of a headset. What we experienced is that the people are much more involved, much more open to speak, to encounter, to feel things, to learn, and of course during 1 year and a half, less than 1 year and a half, 1 year, let's say, we did only virtual events, and now we are starting to move to hybrid events. How you can combine these virtual worlds and the future metaverse with the physical part of training of an event, and it's changed completely the way to conceive the event and the operation. But it's here. It means that, of course, the metaverse will last maybe 3 to 5 years more, to maybe more. But the beginning is here, and there is a lot of companies starting to use directly or to learn how to use this these virtual worlds. We are doing advices for several big companies on that subject. So that's it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Laurent. Now I present Lorenzo Cappannari, the last speaker of this night. And hi, Lorenzo.
Ciao. Hi.
Sorry, just one moment. Okay. And now please join me in welcoming Lorenzo Cappannari, CEO of AnotheReality, professor on the metaverse-related topics, and author of a book entitled Possible Future: How the Metaverse and New Technologies Will Change Our Future, published in March 2022 by Giunti Editore, one of the most important Italian publishers, for which I carry out a research path in the field of new technologies. Lorenzo is also the organizer of an event to be held in Italy on April 21, entitled The Era of Virtual Transformation Begins Now. His speech is called Toward Virtual Transformation. Hi, Lorenzo, please.
Ciao, Cecilia. Thank you. Thank you. I will share the presentation in a second. Okay, so thanks for the invitation. I will try to be rather quick, give you an overview of what I have covered in my latest book, which is called Possible Futures: How the Metaverse and New Technologies Will Change Our Life. And actually, I started writing the book before the new word metaverse became hype. So we added metaverse later on the cover. But obviously, the metaverse is the main topic of all of us working in the XR environment for quite some time. Let's see what, in my point of view, the metaverse is. The metaverse is many things. It's, first of all, a new paradigm connecting physical and digital world. So basically the next iteration of the internet that is seeing our physical and virtual lives converge. So from this perspective and this point of view, the metaverse is something that is quite difficult to define, but it's something we clearly see, those of us working in technology, and we clearly see approaching for many years now. But the metaverse is also a convergence of many different technologies that will, like before calling it metaverse, many were calling spatial computing technologies. Actually, spatial computing is a group, and it was very well underlined in the previous speeches, is a group of different technologies. Some of them are more visible than others. And I like depicting them as an iceberg. Those are on top of the water are those that we clearly see as the most visible technologies, like virtual worlds, social virtual worlds, and XR. But there are many others that obviously that each one taken separately cannot be defined metaverse. I strongly agree when Charlie was saying the blockchain is not the metaverse per se. Could be part of the overall ecosystem, just like the rest of other technologies. They are all technologies that will make this paradigm of uniting physical and virtual under the same roof. But let's have a look at virtual worlds and XR, because they, as I just said, are the most visible technologies and probably are the typical technologies that are referred to when we talk about the metaverse. So virtual worlds are basically the crossroad between social media and video games. Conceptually, the metaverse is this future vision that revolves around this concept of social worlds that owes a lot. This concept of social virtual world, they owe a lot to the history of gaming, like multiplayer gaming, they've been around for quite some time, over 30 years. So the novelty here is that these multiplayer games are now used as social platforms. Like people, especially younger generations, they use this multiplayer gaming to socialize in virtual environments. That's why they're so interesting. And there are some games that can be called metaverses, that where people don't just play, but they socialize and do other activities. And there are social platforms where that are not games. They use the same technologies just to make people meet in these spaces, in these virtual spaces, and maybe do events or just meet each other and just get to know each other, whatever people do in real life, but just in a virtual environment. There's just another technology that I believe is strictly dependent on the mass adoption of the metaverse, and it's immersive technologies, XR. Strongly agree again with Charlie when he says that the whole metaverse concept owns a lot and to XR, VR, MR, and we really should look at this technology very closely when we look at the development, the possible futures of the metaverse. And I think that the reason why is strictly linked to the concept of emotional technologies. If you look at the history of media, technology has always been used to take a story and bring it to the masses in a more effective way. They started with books, photos, television, videos, multimedia and computing brought interaction. And then, but what they have done until there is just translating a story with a technology and making it immersive in a way, more and more immersive. But always creating indirect emotions. So basically, indirect emotion is the type of emotion that a story gives to us when it's decoded by our brain. I tell you a story, you listen to the story, your brain decodes, and then an emotion happens. Whereas immersive technology is the first technology ever that basically kind of disappears the interface, and it's the first one that is able to deliver direct emotions. And I think this is really the key around why XR is so important when it comes to the metaverse. I mean, we have seen a lot of technologies that have tried to give us stronger emotions, where virtual reality, mixed reality, wearable technologies are the first that are replicating reality. So they're able to give us exactly the same emotions that we have in real life. And this is something, I think it's a breakthrough. I mean, they are the first technologies that are able to deliver real experiences from remote, artificial experiences, but that provide real emotions just like real life. So there's also another point of view of why I believe that XR is so relevant for the metaverse. If we look at this chart, is technology applied to dematerialization and identity experiences. You're pretty familiar, I guess, all of you who are listening to this speech about the IT, the computing revolutions. We have the PC, internet, we're 2.0, mobile revolution, then you have the metaverse. If you look at it, you have like an increasing level of identity engagement, like people entering with their own avatar, their own identity within a specific virtual environment. But there's also another point, like you have a level of dematerialization of real things that is growing. If you see at this, sorry, if you see, I love to quote this email that Mark Zuckerberg wrote to the shareholders of a formerly known company called Facebook in 2015. He was trying to explain why he was investing so much in AR, VR. And the last sentence, I think, is crucial. It's because you will no longer need to buy phones or TVs or many other physical objects. They can just become apps in a digital store. So it's data that becomes space, and space will embed data. So physical and virtual world that will collide. And this will create new opportunities of dematerialization. So a lot of objects will slowly disappear and will be substituted by holograms, by virtual environments. And this is what the metaverse is bringing about as well. Not just strong emotions, not just experiences, but also dematerialization of more and more and more products, places, and even people. So if we say that digital transformation is something that was allowed by computers, smartphones, and internet, and allowed the digitization of paper documents and multimedia content. Think about internet, digitizing documents and papers and books and multimedia content. Obviously, Web 2.0, thanks to the mobile, you can take a video and a photo without needing a specific item called camera. The virtual transformation is something that is coming up and is going to disrupt the world as we know, because like the metaverse technologies have the power of digitizing pretty much any physical object. Places, things, people, they will just become apps in an app store. And by becoming app, I think that the potential of creating new unicorn, new ecosystems, new economies is enormous. But the only way of making this happen is to deliver a very fluid technology without any kind of friction. And that can happen, in my point of view, only thanks to clear adoption of XR technologies. XR that have already shown the potential. So virtual transformation, as that we just tried to define, has already shown a potential in 5 pillars. So in healthcare, culture and arts and storytelling, entertainment, socialization, just seeing social virtual worlds. And then we have education and business. Business, we all have, like, you could drill it down further, but if you take these 5 pillars, you can probably, most of you can recognize a lot of interesting use cases where XR and the metaverse and the virtual transformation technologies we've been talking about are already delivering value. But the value that these technologies will deliver will come right in the future when the metaverse technologies will become more massified, more mature. So in fact, we are right in the middle of a paradigm transition from a digital transformation to virtual transformation. We're right in the chasm. Why? Because you see all these social virtual worlds popping up, all these experiences in VR and AR. You see the technology there, you see it coming, but it's still not mature. And the reason why it's not mature is that there is something missing. We are in the chance because there is something missing, and that something missing is something that is coming up probably in the coming years. Like we all believe, those of us who are in the industry, that the smartphone will eventually become an XR wearable. We're evolving to something else anyway that is going to be wearable, and like the soft signals are already out there. We can see it. So I think that when this will happen, we will have a new superpowers, definitely new use cases that will bring about new threats. Like I think that the concept of digital divide would evolve further. So new superpowers will come like remote schools, remote office, virtual tourism economies, cities, augmented cities, virtual paths assistance, predictive healthcare, human augmentation, and so on and so forth. And each one of them will have some threats. And just we know that consumer technologies, massified technologies bring almost existential threats to our society. We have seen it. So we should be ready already today to try to understand and try to predict what are the risks that these new technologies, one massified obviously, will bring, and try to discuss how we should start designing them, those of us who are in the field at least, in order to make sure that these threats will not actually happen. So that's why we have organized an event, an international event in Milan, weird enough, a technology event in Milan. But the idea is to start a discussion exactly on what the metaverse and virtual transformation technologies are and what are the risks and how we should start working in order to design them properly. And sorry if I've been very quick, but I think we're a bit late, and I'm done. Thank you so much. Happy to answer your questions if you have.
Wow, thanks, Lorenzo. It was very, very interesting. So thanks for sharing these insights with us. So now it's the time for the panel. Since we are super late, I will just ask one question per speaker and ask you to answer in maximum 1 minute, so we can finish very, very fast. For you, Charlie, I have a question from the chat. Since you have written this book about meeting platforms, someone asked, what do you think are the biggest pain points of meeting virtually? And what companies do you think are addressing those pain points particularly well? You're on mute. The most famous sentence of this year, you're on mute.
Sorry, I turned off my sound because my dog was going crazy earlier. The issue of remote collaboration, as I predicted, most of the companies that went into remote collaboration in 2020 have either folded or pivoted like Spatial has. Engage has doubled down, and of course the big event was that Meta Horizons Workrooms, which is certainly the best, but I don't know how many people are going to do remote collaboration on the platform of the least trusted company in the world. So, they have that going against them in almost every respect, even though they're spending the most money. While we're on that topic, I mean, every day I go to sleep hoping that they've learned from the mistakes that they've made, and every month I'm reminded that they have not. So this is the same management, the same people. I think that's one of the big questions about the oasis that they're building. I mean, just because they build it, do we want to live there? On the other hand, knowing what we know about them, we're all still using Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. So if the app is good enough, we'll put up with even the most questionable management. But in terms of remote collaboration with business, I think people are extra secure and there are better options. Well, what we see in remote collaboration is, to the limited extent it's being used corporately and Accenture is selling hard, it isn't used that often or preferred in any way. So it's having trouble getting a foothold. I have no doubt that remote collaboration and business collaboration will be a big application in the metaverse. But I think we are, like with the real metaverse, big M metaverse, probably a decade away from that.
Thank you. Suzanne, 1 minute question for you as well. So in your opinion, since there is a lot of talking about metaverse and use cases, is there a use case that you think has not been talked that much about, but you see a lot of potential in it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. Obviously, I'm a big believer in using immersive technology to interact with data. And that's such a broad statement. The thing that we see in the forefront right now, at least on our end, is looking at spatial data in a spatial environment. So like I was saying about the C-Signal product, actually looking at real world data overlaid on the real world. So using, the technology to have this sort of window into what's really happening right here, right now in your actual environment, and then being able to use that data to make real world decisions about it. So one of the use cases would be like for telecom, for 5G, being able to visualize the coverage of a particular area and then make adjustments in real time to optimize the strength of the network. So that's a huge use case that we're sort of honing in on, and that we get a lot of interest in and a lot of stuff. And I don't think that a lot of people really, I mean, that one's very hyper specific to one industry. But I don't think a lot of people really talk about that one a lot or speak on it a lot. So that's a good example of it. Obviously, collaboration is a huge one. I agree with Charlie on that too. I think there are still a lot of limitations to it. I think if the way that you're doing collaboration, if you're able to do it without having to go through to a cloud, you're talking about local collaboration. There's a lot of, we've seen a lot of interest in that as well. Training is a big one. But yeah, so that would be my answer without going on too long.
That's great. Lorenzo, since you're organizing these physical events, what about this comparison between, events in the metaverse, in the digital like this one, or in real life? What's your point of view in the difference between these three kind of events and the pros and cons of all of them?
That's a complex question. As we are organizing an hybrid event, it's partially physical and partially digital. I think that the direction is clearly that one. So you cannot really scale an event internationally if you do it only physical. Especially if people are not willing to travel, but the type of human touch, emotion, and networking that you can do physically is something that you cannot actually right now replicate in a digital environment. Then there's the metaverse, and it depends on what you mean by metaverse. With today's technology, it's still quite complicated to have a meaningful event in a 3D world that exactly replicates the concept of real life events. But I believe that that's where we're heading. I think that the future of event will be partially physical and partially in the 3D social virtual worlds that will be we will enter with wearable hardware and will be more realistic in terms of graphics.
That was a great answer. So Laurent, it's your turn for the last question. And when talking about the metaverse, people always think about dystopia that can be in the future for the privacy, the safety, etc. But is this our fate, or we can actually build something much better than this?
I do believe that we can build something good. I was saying that I almost stopped virtual reality 3 years ago, and therefore I enter in the ethical part of our technologies, and well, I think that we are entering in a kind of speculative bubble. This will last maybe 3, 5, 7 years, and this bubble will explode. And exploding, there will be a recomposition of the companies working on this. And I'm sure that new champions will emerge, and these champions have to be ethical. And for me, this is the condition of the success of the metaverse.
Oh, that's great. So Cecilia, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Laurent. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Lorenzo. Thank you all for being here. AWE USA 2022, taking place in Santa Clara, California, June 1, 2, and 3, primarily in a person conference and also with an online element. See you soon at the AWE USA 2022, and see you soon at the next AWE Nite Florence event. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.